Today is June 19th, 2020, and as you're probably aware, eBay has had a spectacularly horrific week as a company. News broke earlier this week that there was an enormous stalking and harassment scandal allegedly emanating from the highest levels of eBay corporate culture and penetrating pretty far through. I'm not going to talk too much about that because you're probably already sick of it. And also, what can I say? It's just awful. I have nothing to add. Let's talk about the other thing that happened in eBay land this week, which is that they, all of a sudden, released a new offensive materials policy. And it just so happens that today is Juneteenth, and this week, like quite a few that have immediately preceded it, has seen an ongoing explosion of racial strife in the US. And not uncoincidentally, a lot of corporations and brands are just scurrying to cover their arses so as not to be seen as complicit, be blamed or suffer brand perception problems or shareholder problems, etc., etc. Not that I'm totally cynical about corporate social responsibility and their too little too late tendencies. Suffice to say, eBay suddenly has released a new offensive materials policy, and they did this in a rather awkward manner where initially, at the beginning of the week, they apparently, according to some reliable sources, started just taking down people's listings in the Black Americana category and sending their account would be negatively affected out of the blue. Then the next day or two, they recanted a bit, fixed that, and started sending out some more organized emails that had a more reasonable message. So I'll show you this one that I received on the 16th. My listing was removed, offensive material policy. They essentially say that my listing didn't follow their policy, which of course was not in place when I listed it, and that they're updating their policy, and they ended my listing and I shouldn't relist it. Here's the new policy. They've placed my item in unsold items. They credited all fees except for payment processing and final value fee, which of course are not applicable because this was obviously not a sold listing. And no policy violations have been recorded on my account. Don't do it again. If you're curious, this item was a Valentine's card from the 30s, which depicted a Black man holding a suitcase and a parrot. He's in a hotel porter's uniform. It wasn't hyperbolic or caricature particularly, but it certainly was designed and produced at the time to poke fun. It wasn't meant as a respectful depiction. So that's removed, that's fine, I'm not going to relist it. What's a little troubling, however, is that the Black Americana category exists or has existed because these items and artifacts are collected by scholars, academics, and writers and thinkers, and indeed by African Americans to study and preserve and bear witness to history. When taken in that context, they're important. But again, I see that they're easily taken out of context as well. And in a free marketplace like eBay, that danger can be quite broad. So I don't disagree with their decision. I think maybe they should have thought of this years ago. I've always felt very awkward listing these items, actually. And I'm not just saying this. I'm not kowtowing to public sentiment. I've always thought it was very uncomfortable for me to list these items, and I've never bought one on purpose. They've always been things that have come in lots of many items. I understand that people collect them for their historical value and to study and preserve the ugly sides of history, and I appreciate that as a history buff myself, but these things make me super uncomfortable. I don't like even owning them temporarily while they're being listed. Frankly, I'm kind of happy to have an excuse not to deal in them anymore. Not that I couldn't have refused before. Like I said, it doesn't bother me that eBay has changed this policy. They sent out an even suaver email reiterating what they said in the first one. Apologize for any surprise or confusion about this policy change. At any rate, here's the new policy. You can find it on the offensive materials policy page in eBay Help. Essentially, it's actually not that dissimilar to what they used to have. They do at the top mention that it pertains to discrimination, hatred, or violence on grounds of race, ethnicity, color, religion, gender, or sexual orientation, which I think is really good because everything in their bullet points is very specific to anti-Black and anti-Semitic special cases. So I'm glad they put this statement up here. They haven't really changed that much. This is really the part that's new, that you can't list items with racist, anti-Semitic, or otherwise demeaning portrayals. And that's the key part, demeaning portrayals. And I don't think that's that much of a subjective thing. And I know people will argue that it is, but like the whole Supreme Court pornography, I know it when I see it. You can infer the intent of an artifact by knowing a little bit about its context. I don't think it's really that vague. I think it's pretty specific. And they even go on to say caricatures, exaggerated features, cartoons, etc. And then they spell out some exceptions, which is, again, helpful. Historic things that don't glorify violence, intolerance, or racial stereotyping. That leaves some room for still disseminating important historical artifacts, items related to the civil rights movement, and certain Nazi items. The one bullet point I find a little bit problematic is this one. Slavery items, including reproductions such as tags, shackles, documents, bills of sale, etc. Now, of course, reproduction shackles, that's terrible. But when they say documents, I feel like that's just too broad because there are documents which are slavery items, which include manumission papers or manuscripts pertaining to abolition or other important historical documents that help us to understand not just slavery, but the end of slavery. And even so, like African Americans do genealogical research on their families. And unfortunately, part of that is looking at censuses, which include slave schedules and perhaps bills of sale and wills leaving slaves to other people. And I mean, yeah, these documents are horrible, but they are not only a part of our history, but a part of our history that people are actively seeking to understand their own personal heritage. So I feel like this bullet point is a little overly broad, and perhaps they will refine it, or perhaps they will not police it in the strictest sense when it comes to the kinds of things that I was just mentioning. But anyway, that's a lot of op-ed for my channel. And you can read through this yourself. And I do encourage everyone, including me, to curb your cynicism as much as possible and take this as a positive step towards a better community in which to run our businesses and interact with other people and to give them a positive experience. I hope this was informative in some way. If so, please hit the thumbs up icon and perhaps the wee bell icon to subscribe to my channel for further notifications. And thanks, and take care.